Well, Jim, thanks for joining us on Serves You Right.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I thought it'd be fun to start if I can. So let's imagine we're at a cocktail party and someone asks what you do for a job. And I'm sure that answer has changed through the years, but what do you tell them?
Yeah, that's been an evolving reality. I think that the one constant is I've been a farmer on our current farm, Hoskinsberry Farm here in Western Oregon. I've been here since 1987. Farming. And before that, I was farming in Western Oregon and then before that in Montana. So that's been the constant. We grow blackberries and medicinal herbs here in Oregon. We actually ferment those to a blackberry vinegar. So I'm also a processor, I guess, for lack of another word. We take our fruit and move it on to a value-added product, which is it's a true blackberry vinegar. It's not vinegar flavored with blackberries. So we literally, and it's non-interventional, so we harvest the fruit. This is all biodynamic fruit. Harvest it, ferment it on its own skins. So these would be the native. Folks like to say yeast, same with wine grapes, and native organisms that take fruit to alcohol. And then for 25 years, we've been doing this. So we have our own mother, right? Which she's basically just the acetic acid that results. And originally, we took some blackberry vinegar, or blackberry wine, and added, I believe it was Bragg's apple cider vinegar. You need a live mother.
Just to start it off, yeah.
Yeah, to start it off way back then. And ever since then, our vinegar and our barrels have been the mother. And so that's the constant farming. I've always had an off-farm job that started out as an organic inspector. This is back in the days before the organic regulation, the USDA regulation. So I had certifiers sending me all over the world. It was just fantastic experience. Places like Indonesia, Russia, China, Mexico, Costa Rica, a lot of different countries, and also doing Demeter inspections even back then. In 2002, I became the executive director of the Demeter Association in the United States. And I was that director until 2018. So there was a pretty long run doing that. And it's ebbed and flowed, all farming throughout all of that. And then still farming. And I'm a consultant for 6 different projects across North America, all related to regenerative and biodynamic farming.
Sure, but there's that common thread, the farming. That's the thing that holds it all together.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yep. Yeah.
Now, for those of my listeners, and it wouldn't be a ton, but just to make sure that we leave no listener behind, Demeter, which I've always heard as Demeter, and I did want to ask you which one is preferred, but could you go into a little bit of what that organization is?
Sure, I can. So the pronunciation, she's the Greek goddess of agriculture, right? There's the story of her mother Persephone, and Demeter gets pulled into the underworld and by Hades, and as the story goes, that's basically winter time, and then reemerges in the spring.
Well, it may just be that, in my youth, when I was growing up in Texas, when we learned about classical Greek literature, the teacher said Demeter, and there might just be different ways to say that name. Who knows? That is
so. It's an international. The certifier around biodynamic agriculture is international, and so that's where it happens in the pronounce. It's the same name. U.S. Americans tend to call her Demeter, right? If you go to Europe or like Switzerland, it's Demeter. And so really it depends on which language is saying it. Yeah, but it is often pronounced differently. And so Demeter is international. It's basically a federation of member countries. It's really unique in the organic agriculture world because there's nothing else really like it, where a base international standard, a minimum standard, is set democratically by, I've lost track how many countries, but many countries. There's a Demeter Egypt, Demeter Brazil, all the European countries. It's active on every continent. And so it's a really fascinating reality, international reality around biodynamic agriculture. And it's been around since 1928. So it's a really interesting thing in the consumer world with all the discussion around regenerative, which you may or may not have seen. There's more and more definitions of that popping up, everything from what Syngenta says it is to biodynamic. But that, those certifications didn't start happening until around 2015, 16. The USDA NOP itself goes back to 2002. Biodynamic goes back to 1928, and our Demeter, and it's been going ever since. So I guess it kind of brings some authenticity. The word organic literally was coined out of the idea of a biodynamic farm as a living organism.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's a really fascinating space to be in this modern world of natural products and what have you. Are you hearing the dinging of my text coming in?
I did, but I think that that's just something that goes off when you make a good statement. So we'll just
it could be like an
idea
bubble,
a check mark.
Right.
Yes,
right, got it. Good.
Yeah. I think that is good, and I hope we do get a chance to dig into this a little bit because, I think a lot of my listeners, because most of them are located in the United States, if they are aware of or near farming, I'm sure that the large majority of them, the chances they've had to interact with agriculture almost certainly have been industrial agriculture, like as they call it, conventional. As a PR move, great choice for branding, conventional. But they see the long rows, they see the tractors, the spraying, and that's even if they are close to a farm. There are huge numbers of people who don't even ever see farms, and their only interaction with agricultural products is grocery shelf wrapped in plastic. Can you kind of paint for us how different it is, conventional versus what you do? I'm sorry to interrupt. This will be fast, I promise. Please take a moment and leave a comment on the show. It really would mean the world to me. Let me know what you're thinking. Let me know what we're doing well and what we could improve on. I'd love to hear from you all. All right, back at it.
And so you hit on it, the word conventional. I mean, even that spectrum is pretty broad. It's definitely, it's been pretty defined by input intense agriculture based on oil, really, which is really interesting right now to watch all this going on and how much attention is put to a little strait in the Mideast that the oil flow has to go through. And yeah, it affects our cars and our trucks and gas prices and all, but it also is the lifeline for artificial synthetic fertilizers, basically nitrogen. And so my definition of conventional agriculture is that. And you're from Iowa. Your parts of your state are a good example with the corn and soybean rotations, and they're synthetic nitrogen dependent and Roundup Ready dependent, basically. And, so it's a whole package of chemical intensive agriculture that has been sold to farmers generationally at this point, right? And it's a loop you get into, especially with debt, that it is really hard to get out of, right? Let alone just... So there's that. And then biodynamic is kind of like the polar opposite of that. The idea of biodynamics is to generate your inputs internally out of the living dynamics of the farming system itself, the biology. For instance, you're integrating livestock, you're generating biodiversity, and the success of the farming system is based on the biological network that you create, basically. So you're like a conductor of a symphony, a living symphony. You're not separate from it. And it's really, so it's that. That is the original definition of regenerative agriculture, that you're creating a system that's generating natural resource rather than degenerating natural resource. So it's a social asset. And, it's good for farmers because you become independent from the need for all these things in bottles and bags, and you're generating those needs out of the health and the life of a farming system. So you're really utilizing the inherent wisdom of the earth as a tool. The natural world has all these mechanisms built in for water conservation and flow, pest management, fertility. A wilderness forest grows on its own. And those methods, you could call it biomimicry, but it's not really mimicry. It's like whatever the word would be. I mean, you're literally utilizing the Earth's ability to build soil and an ecological system's ability to maintain pest balance. You're using that as a tool.
Yeah. I do like that kind of summation. And in my head, the phrase that kind of hit me was not man over nature, but man in nature. Like you are part of the system, not over it and separate from it. And you can't run or maybe can't isn't the right word because people do, but maybe shouldn't possibly run a farm like an Excel sheet where it's inputs, outputs, the formula just pushes it down the line. And when you get to that, when the inputs get screwy, like with a war and over a little strait hundreds of miles away, then the outputs get screwy too.
They do. They do. Yeah.
Here's, I think, where, especially when I'm talking to guests about this sort of thing, where I think they get lost. Because, up to this point, and, I'm not, a really, religious, spiritual person, even though I do, like everyone else, I have moments, but I'm with you 100%. Everything you said is, not only sounds good and reasonable, I'm like, why would this even be in question? This is clearly, undoubtedly, makes way more sense than just, stripping the land of all of its life and just pumping it full of chemicals. Like some person, like our medical system, who's just, propped up on medicine and, barely holding on to life. When it gets to the implementation of biodynamic treatments, that's always where I'm like, wait, hold on.
So you're getting,
I feel like I lost something.
The spirituality aspect of biodynamic agriculture, and maybe that's the right word, maybe that's the wrong word. One way to look at it is it goes back to, if you want to look at it linearly, the idea that a farm is a living organism, right? And so when you look at any living organism, any ecosystem, what biodynamic brings in is a recognition that there are wider influences affecting it, right? Like the moon, for instance, that's a good example, like the moon. But I would just start, by the way, with the sun is a celestial body, and photosynthesis is the base of everything, right? That's the process where plants take in sunlight, turn it into chlorophyll, and things grow. But leaving the sun aside a second, just keep that in mind. It's a celestial body, and it's connected to the farming system. The moon, any surfer or fishing person will tell you that the moon has a profound effect on water. Water is, what is associated with photosynthesis that makes plants grow, and so literally you can look at things like full moon, new moon, even the moon's progression across the zodiac, and like at full moon, the turgor pressure in a cell, this is just, basic plant physiology. Turgor pressure is like when it's higher, the plant is growing, right? Because its cells are dividing everything. Turgor pressure is higher at a full moon than a new moon, just like the waves are bigger at those two periods of time. And that's a gravitational pull thing from a celestial body that is every 28 days up and down. It affects women hugely.
I mean, hospitals, right? Hospitals, any doctor will tell you on a full moon that people behave
bleed
differently. Like, I work in hospitality, and when there's a full moon, people behave differly, even if we don't know why
lunatics,
exactly. Yeah,
right. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah,
yeah. So that things are amped up. But I use that as an example, like, the criticisms that come at biodynamic is like, this is woo-woo and voodoo and what have you. And it's like, it's more like, of course, there are wider implications to a natural system. It's like, of course, there are, not having to defend that there are. And so the biodynamic preparations that you hear about, really, this goes back to a guy, Rudolf Steiner, who goes back to the turn of the century and did work in things like education. So you might be aware of Waldorf education. It's pretty much everywhere in the United States now. A whole approach to medicine, a whole approach to architecture. If you ever get a chance and look at like the Goetheanum in Switzerland, it's an example of some of the architecture he did. But anyhow, agriculture was one of the last things he did in his life. And it was in 1924, and not because he wanted to, apparently, but more because the scientific world, ironically, and the agricultural world at that time came to him, because we were at the stage of the so-called Green Revolution, which was basically the conventional agriculture we were just talking about, and already seeing issues with. One of the main ones was farmers always saved their own seed. Again, we're talking about the turn of the century, and all of a sudden the seed was way less viable, right? And livestock were having issues. There were new pest issues that never were there before, ecological issues. So it was about that. And so it was a collection of farmers, scientists, counts and countesses in Europe. And lo and behold, he gives a pretty esoteric set of lectures over a period of like a week in June 1924, describing the esoteric world of biodynamic agriculture. And he didn't even name it biodynamic. That came to finish a long story. He gave these lectures and then the next year died. So basically, it laid down a bunch of indications that humanity took forward, right? And so there was a really interesting group of people that came out of those lectures that were scientists, researchers, agronomists, that kind of really did lay down the foundation of what biodynamic agriculture is, named it. A guy named Ehrenfried Pfeiffer, who was at Steiner's side through all of this, brought biodynamics to America, the United States, in like 1938. A long time ago, was working with J.R. Rodale, in the 40s, and, at the very, very, very beginning of the organic agriculture movement in this country. So yeah, there's like, I give workshops and all, and if you're to explain the biodynamic preparations, you need about a week.
Okay, so more than an hour conversation for sure.
Yeah. But I'll just finish on that. They are, all things aside, what makes biodynamic products unique Besides, they also are upholding this foundation of organic and regenerative, right? And that's got ecological implications, but there's also quality implications, like, the use of the biodynamic preparations, the following celestial activity is aimed at product quality, right? Not quantity. For instance, one of the biodynamic preparations is based on silicon dioxide and quartz and the assimilation of light. And if you dive into like the biodynamic wines around the world, you'll find that a lot of those practitioners will discuss the quartz preparation, the preparation 501, as a means of, in, say, wine grapes, improving complexity and, more than just bricks, but the actual flavors and the colors. So it is unique in that sense that it's holistic in the widest sense, and it really is a quality-focused agricultural production method, not quantity, quality. And that's across the board, whether it's sauerkraut or mezcal, right?
Yeah.
And so,
No, I think you hit it right on the head with that quality thing, because, it's always struck me that conventional agriculture seems like it's the wrong answer to the correct question. We do need food, and we've gotten to a place that were all agriculture to disappear, it'd be a very rough few years, because there's not enough food just that we can forage for all of humanity at this moment. So it makes sense that you would look for an answer, something that's very secure, where you put in X, you get Y back. And I understand the anxiety that led people to go down that road.
I do too.
But then, you hear these things, and there's all those famous quotes about the land of Burgundy being more dead than the moon, and all these things that people have kind of quipped offhand. It's, even people who maybe aren't bought in to the idea of biodynamics, or maybe they say it must be doing something, but we don't know the mechanism. The amount of even bigger houses in the world of wine who have tested plots in different places, biodynamic versus conventional, and switched, even if they maybe don't believe in the philosophy, leads me to think it's not clear to me exactly what or why it's happening, but I think it's clear to a lot of people that even if it sounds funny, it's it is doing something. It is a noticeable improvement of quality. And yeah, I think quality over quantity is probably the right path to think through it.
Yeah, wine's a good ambassador for that concept too, right? And the other important thing about wine, or alcohol in general, different types, is you interviewed Alice Firing recently, right?
Oh yes, the firing, yes.
Yeah, right. So, in that world of non-intervention in wine, when that happens, the only way you can define the quality is how you grow the grapes, right? Which, that is the history of wine, right? It's defined by the grape and how it's grown. So back to biodynamic and the Demeter standard, there's a winemaking standard that's very specific to wine, and it's very non-interventionist. It really moves in order to hit it, like to have a biodynamic Chardonnay. It has to be based on the grapes and their quality, because you can't add yeast, you can't add ML bacteria, you can't acidify, you can't increase bricks with sugar, you can't deacidify with water. And so it's a really special thing, when it hits quality, right? So then it gets into the wine world and the critics, and back in the day it was Robert Parker, I don't know who it is now, but Eric Osmanoff in New York, or whoever, who they've always kind of floated around biodynamic wines, and every now and then more and more they come out as really high quality, right? And usually a high price point on the bottle. And so wine is a good ambassador for the idea of quality farming methods as the end game.
Well, I think wine has a special characteristic too where, it's one of the few agricultural products I can think of where more of one specific thing isn't always a good thing. If I am someone who wants to have corn, if I have more corn, I'm probably going to be happy. But if we have a couple bottles of DRC, if we have 10,000 now, the world's not going to be happy. It's the rarity of the specific area that actually makes people happy about it. So it's like it branded itself very well, where it's like, no, we are of the earth. We are tied to the earth. And, it actually has that too. You don't hear people talking about, like, I got this blackberry from this state, this blueberry is from this state, at least not often. But everyone talks about wine bottles from a place. So it has that too. Yeah.
They do. And then this is the authenticity thing. So that is the thing. So biodynamic wine is a wine from a place defined, really. And, it's that old French terroir concept. But it is. I mean, the flip side of that is if it's a bad weather year or what have you, and your grapes aren't hitting the quality you want, then it doesn't necessarily make a good wine, right? And so, it is what it is in that sense. And there's this whole pretty fascinating history in the United States of America around biodynamic wine. It really started in California back in the 80s with, iconic California wine brands, right, that were around then, families like the Fetzers, the Benzigers, though they're New Yorkers that came out to California, a number of them making biodynamic wines way back when, at that time, even at the not far from the time when California wines went to France and won the competition kind of thing. And so there's that whole biodynamic Americana thing that actually at this stage in our lives has a pretty rich history. And then there's the international reality, which goes back even longer. And there you're finding really iconic wineries and vineyards in France and Italy, Austria, Spain. Yeah. Even Sting was working on a biodynamic wine project.
And that's when it's gone mainstream. Yeah.
It draws people, that care about food and beverage, really, the quality.
Speaking of that, the people that care about food and beverage quality, if I were, say, just like a young, eager learning server or bartender, are there some good resources out there that I could go to kind of get my head around this sort of thing? Maybe not only biodynamic, but like what is organic biodynamic? Like how would one educate oneself? Do you know of some good sources?
Yeah, and that's an important education. Like there's organic wine, there's made with organic grape wine, there's biodynamic wine, there's made with biodynamic grape wine. And, to answer your question, I don't think education on all that at once is in any one place. If you want to understand biodynamic wine, a good place to start is with the Demeter winemaking standard. And really, if you want to really dive in, then you got to dive into the farming standard, which is how the grapes are grown. Same with organic. Organic was an interesting thing. Like I was explaining, biodynamic wine is that unmanipulated grape idea, the terroir idea. Organic wine, all it means is that no sulfites were added.
So there's a lot more wiggle room there, yeah.
Yeah, and you can really manipulate the hill out of a organic wine or a made with organic grape wine. And so there's all that, but the way the grapes were grown, many will argue is better, right? Better, because you can't use synthetic fertilizers, you can't use herbicides, you can't use synthetic pesticides in organic, let alone biodynamic. So for a server, because, yeah, I get it. And a bartender, like you're presenting the product to a consumer really at the end of the day because you want to sell it to them.
And I mean, every rep is going to say that their XYZ is perfect and they're organic because it makes more sense. So there is a lot of disinformation that comes your way when you are in that position too.
Yeah. For a biodynamic wine, the beauty of it is, and there are also spirits out there, even some in the United States, that are really excellent. But it boils down to authenticity. This is a true expression of the agriculture that this bottle came from, and that's it. I mean, the person sitting at the bar having a drink before dinner, or poured a glass at the table, they're probably not going to have the attention span to hear the whole spiel of, what we're talking about. And this is interesting because as back to Demeter and biodynamic, as it grows in the marketplace, it's like, how do you explain this? Because this is a world of sound bites, and it's what's the word? What's not coming to me? If you're looking at it as a brand that has this really rich history, both in this country and globally, the word isn't coming to me. But
yeah, I'm not sure what you're going for there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. It'll come to me later. Just keep going.
Yeah.
It'll come to me because it's been coming up in conversations lately that this is a blank concept brand that it's based on its history. There's certain products out there, even in the United States, that go back 100 years or so. Anyhow, keep going. The word will come to me.
There are people yelling into their headphones at home, just like, come on. No.
Yeah, the word has been lost. It's an authentic brand, but there's a better word for that than...
Well, I do like the word authenticity. And you've done that around a couple times. And, I forget which book of hers it's in, but Alice Firing even says at one point where she's talking to someone in the book, I think I used the word natural when the word I was really looking for was authenticity. And I loved that with her approach to wine because it does ring true. There is an artificialness to a lot of the wines that are grown conventionally, and we've grown used to that. And I think we've substituted our different criteria for excellence to ones that fit into the inauthentic model sometimes. Wines, one of her big gripes, and I agree completely with Parker's problem here, it's like bigger wines aren't always better. But, that happened, and that was a thing. And
was a thing.
I forget which Master Somm said it, but I loved it. It said, liking a wine for how bold it is like liking music for how loud it is. It's like, I think you're missing the point.
Unless you like loud music.
Like loud music. But no one is blasting Beethoven in their house or going down the street. Usually it's tied with something else. And we kind of separated out these qualities, and it was useful for the inauthentic wines because their qualities can be manipulated if you're willing to manipulate them. You can't really, there's no one-to-one interaction with, intensity of flavor, fruit quality, but alcohol volume, that's pretty easy. Sugar does that.
There's other things then you get into the whole discussion of new world winemaking versus old world winemaking, and so a good new world winemaker argue that they're an artist or a sculptor or whatever, and so the imprint on those wines is the winemaker, not the grapes and how they're grown. But simple tools like yeast and adjusting acidity, or whatever to get a mouthfeel, and these things, New World winemaker, and you've probably tasted some that are pretty good, right? I mean, they just taste good, right? And they can, and so it's not like those wines can't be good wines. Back to the Demeter standard, like I was saying before, there's two labeling categories. One is biodynamic wine, which is the old world idea. You're going to hit it or you're not, right? And then there's made with biodynamic grape wine, which allows, and it's more regulated, but it allows acidity adjustment. It allows sugar addition. It allows water addition. It allows non-GMO yeast addition. So it is there for, and this was put in front of winemakers like 20 years ago, and it was a really interesting discussion, if not argument. And so that's why there's two categories. Both are based on biodynamic grapes.
Yeah, it's the dieter that has one cheat day versus no cheat days. It's, you know,
exactly.
Some
right?
people think, okay, that's not a diet then, and other people think that's compliance. You know,
I remember my conversations with Alice back in the day. I haven't talked to her in a long time, but she didn't like the fact that there was a made with biodynamic grape category for all the reasons we're saying. And and she had a point. So
yes, I mean, you see both sides of it. There are people out there that, you know, one of the things that I really hold on to is any idea of sustainability, like any idea of continuing the system and keeping it going has to involve this idea of sustainability for the farmer, for the grower, for the producer. And if you know that in 1 out of every 5 years, say, your area, it's just going to be a little hotter and it's just going to taste a little flabby, or, you know, 1 in 5 years, it's not going to get as ripe, so it's going to be a little under what people expect. And you have the trepidation of, does that mean I don't make money in 1 out of 5 years? Do I have to change my labeling 1 out of 5 years? Or I have this option where I can 4 years out of 5 make what would have passed the stringent standards, and on the 5th year add that acidity and then go back. You know, like,
that's what happens.
The flexibility does invite more people into the camp.
Yeah, and you hit on a really important thing on the, you know, there's the bottle on the table or the bar, but it comes from farming, you know, and so farmers are the core of all this. You know, without them, there's nothing. And so, and it's it's not an occupation. Like if you're a young person looking to get into business and you're looking at all the business options out there and you want to make profit, farming's not necessarily the business they're going to go into. I mean, it's ridiculous, really. It's ridiculous. And so
don't quit my job and start making blackberry vinegar. Not today.
You could. But, you know, I tell my consulting clients this. It's like, you know, this is not a business model that you're going to get rich quick off of, if anything. And well, I mean, there's reasons for that, though.
It's kind of like restaurants, honestly. You know, they're both the same thing. They have a guaranteed market every day for the rest of the time because everyone wants to eat. It's all perishable products, and because there's so many options, everyone's racing to the bottom price-wise. Like it's everything like you want in audience and everything you don't want in competition, like pushed together. So everyone eats every day, resets the next day, but everyone eats every day, so there's food all over the place. Part of our problem in America now. Yes.
But it's so important. Yeah. I mean, even, you know, like a good quality restaurant is so important. And you look at like value, right? Like the value of a good ribeye steak dinner should be higher than the value of your iPod. You know, you think about it, just from the satisfaction and pleasure standpoint, but also nutrition and health. And I mean, you are what you eat. That is your health care, right? And so part of the problem we're talking about here, I think, is just a lack of understanding the value of food and beverage, period. But that's a longer story.
I mean, you touched on something big there where it's amazing because the thing that we've been most obsessed with for most of our history has been food, because you need food to live and it's been scarce. And now that it's abundant, it's easy to forget that. Like any natural disaster, the first thing that happens, people go for the food and the water. And it's a useful reminder that the thing we take for granted is itself the thing keeping us alive. And it's not the iPod. iPod can die. You will still live to fight another day.
You will, exactly. Yes. And that's, you know, so maybe that's coming to a head now. like you said, this happened not too long ago, like up in Portland. I can't remember what it was, but there was some kind of issue with transportation and the distribution food, and there was a shortage. And you've seen this with like hurricanes, for instance. It only takes a couple days until the shelves are empty. And when the shelves are empty, you start thinking about that. It's like, wow, okay. And these people don't have gardens or, most of them aren't members of a CSA or connected to a local farm. Though that is there's a lot of momentum around local food and beverage and the whole thing. That could be a survival thing, too. It won't take much to, one computer, one hack of a distribution AI network, and boom, So we might be coming to a head like that sometime here, not too distant future.
So, in conclusion, grow a couple blackberry bushes in the backyard.
Yes, and
just
grow
in case.
A victory garden, right?
Might as well. It is funny how often history repeats itself again and again. We learn the lessons of our ancestors, and we just learn it with a little bit more air conditioning.
Exactly, you're right. Yep.
If someone listening at home wanted to find out more about your farm or find your vinegars, is there somewhere online they can do that, or you only serve local, or?
Yeah, so our vinegar is a long story. We do have a website. It's Hoskins, Hoskins, berryfarm.org. But it's, our marketing has really evolved over the years. I mean, we've been growing berries this whole time, and it started back in the 80s when organic was fantastic as far as farmers go and prices for fruit. We were selling our fruit to, back then, Cascadian Farms, which now is, they were their own company in Rockport, Washington. We were getting really good prices. Organics went mainstream. And with that came international trade, and we quickly found ourselves competing with China and Chile and other countries, and we couldn't compete price-wise, right? And so then you get forced into value adding, and that's how we value added our product into vinegar. And then that's gone through all these renditions. Our current rendition is really packaging it bulk and selling it, and places like Flamingo Estate in Los Angeles, restaurants and all use it bulk. Some will private label it under their own label. But long story short, we still do sell a 5-ounce bottle of blackberry vinegar. We mostly sell it bulk to folks that want to use it bulk. Restaurants included, right? And so you can go to our website. There you'll find our contact information. I think you can still buy a bottle on there. We just moved away from that because dealing with the distribution of 3 bottles here, 10 bottles there.
The frantic emails of, where's my bottle?
Where's my bottle? And the whole thing is we'd prefer to let other retail concepts handle it,
Yes.
But that is where you can find our vinegar. And anybody, that restaurant or otherwise, that's interested, we'll still sell you a 5-ounce bottle of blackberry vinegar. Yeah.
Is there anything that we didn't cover today that we should have? Anything that we missed?
No, I think you've been pretty thorough. The main point is that the agriculture is really important. Farmers are really important. And that's the source of all this. So now more than ever, it's really important to support agriculture in general, and organic and regenerative and biodynamic agriculture, importantly, because there's some big changes happening there with our, the conventional agriculture we started talking about. Even it's realizing at this point it needs to change. And so it's all kind of moving, and it all needs support and understanding. You also noted at the beginning, a lot of folks it's not their fault either. They're just not connected to farming and agriculture, especially if you're in an urban area, you don't really see it, right? But you don't have to get far out of that urban area, and pretty much everywhere now, if what town are you in again? Omaha.
Yeah.
You get outside Omaha, you're going to find local regional agriculture, food hubs, and that sort of thing anywhere in the country you are. Check that out, because not only is that going to give you good quality, fresh food, you can filter through it all. There's organic, there's regenerative, there's biodynamic, there's sustainable, non-certified, you have a lot of options, but the closer to home you can get, the better quality you're going to find, and you're actually helping support a change in agriculture by doing that.
For sure, yeah. No, the farmers markets here are actually pretty on point. There's one farmer in particular that comes to one that my wife goes to every week, and she's like, the arugula, the tomatoes, like she will not eat anything else like in those two categories, her two favorite foods. So it's like, whatever he's doing, just keep doing that. We'll keep giving him money, but
that's good, and that's supporting him, and it's direct, right? So you're pulling out all the middle people, and that becomes more pure profit for the farmer, but also a better price for you too. So it just makes total sense, I think.
Yeah. I think there's, if I were to sum up what you just said, it's that what's on your table, and I always think through the lens of beverage, so what's in your glass, it matters, and just treat it as such. It can't be an afterthought.
No. Yeah, and there's a plethora of really good quality biodynamic wines. There's spirits and that sort of thing. So if you are a server or a restaurant or a consumer, know those are out there.
Absolutely. Well, Jim, thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure getting to chat with you.
Yeah, and thank you for having me.
Of course.
Appreciate it. Have a great spring.
You too. Thank you for listening. That is today's episode. Now, if you have not taken a moment to check out our website, please do. It's servesyouRightPod.com. We have past episodes and all sorts of other things there. If you want to get in touch with me, that's the place to do it. I do appreciate that you've given me your most valuable asset, your time and attention. So thank you for listening. And stay tuned. We have some really cool guests coming up. I would hate it if you missed it. Cheers.